Valley, coming at you from beautiful BC and somewhere Washington State. This is Left Valley 2.0. My name is Kevin, and I always notice there are more people going into Walmart than coming out, but the media is so cheap, I don't want to ask questions. Guys, welcome for joining. Thank you for joining me. We got the lovely Christine with us. Hey, Christine, how you doing?
Good, thank you.
And your business Troy is also with us. Sorry, I just cut you off. Jesus Christ, I'm so unprofessional. Say that again.
I just said, how's everybody else doing?
We're doing fantastic. I hope so.
Awesome.
And the amazing Troy is joining us again. Troy, how you doing, my man?
Not amazing, but I'll take it. But yeah, I'm doing good, and I'm happy to be here.
Oh, fantastic. Guys, we're going to have a great show today because we have a returning champion, Janice Selbie. She's a snappy dresser, snazzy dancer. Janice, thank you so much for being back with us on the show.
Yay! It's always a pleasure to be back. Thank you.
Applause.
Gotta give you the golf clap.
I'm saying a round of applause, right? A round of applause.
Oh, gosh.
Should I start a wave or no? It doesn't work on a split screen.
She puts a lot of hard work. She totally deserves it. Janice, you've been on the show several times, but maybe people have missed you in the past. We always have new listeners. Maybe you'd be so kind to give us a quick intro as to who Janice Selbie is.
Sure. Yes. I'm joining you from the Okanagan Valley, the unceded territory of the Sea Elk people. And I grew up in a Pentecostal home, very, Bible believing. My parents would speak in tongues and anoint us with oil, that sort of thing. So that seemed normal to me when I was growing up. And I really loved the music at church, and so was fairly involved, and then saw my older siblings each walk away. And I saw how much that hurt my parents. And so I determined, I'm never going to disappoint mom and dad like that. So I dug in super duper deep, and then married a man who became a pastor, and I really went down that fundamentalist rabbit hole, started wearing a head covering, threw away any worldly influences in our home, homeschooled the children, all that kind of stuff. And then one day, I just say it's like holding that beach ball underwater, all that pressure to be so holy and to force myself to believe the unbelievable. One day that beach ball just came flying up out of the water, and it was messy. There was a lot of fallout from that. And so I ended up divorcing my husband, divorcing my religion, and it really started me in a new direction in my life. I went back to school to become a counselor, and now I work with people who are recovering from religious trauma, and I host conferences on religious trauma and purity culture recovery. And I'm just getting ready to start my own podcast, the Divorcing Religion podcast, with Seth Andrews and Hemant Mehta both being guests on there, if you can believe that.
Amazing.
It's shocking.
See, I'll take some of the credit for inspiring you to do your own podcast, because it's all you. Janice told me in private, she says, I saw Kevin's show, and then I thought, I got to be able to do better than that. Here she is with her own show. Congratulations.
Thank you.
What are we expecting you to see you on the air there doing your little podcast?
September 19th is our launch date, and Seth Andrews will be our first guest.
Launching with a bang.
Yeah. And I'm inviting all the guests who have been speakers at the conference on religious trauma. I've had that 2 years in a row. And in October, I'm hosting the Shameless Sexuality Life After Purity Culture Conference. And so I'll also be inviting those speakers to come on as guests, because we have a lot to say about religious trauma and recovery and what is going on in the world today.
And if you ever have a little hole, you need something to fill up, you can always give us a call. We'll be happy to come on your show too.
Nice.
Shameless self-promotion.
I love it.
Let's before we jump into the shameless sexuality thing, let's jump into court just really quickly. Would you be so kind to give us a brief analogy of court? You've been doing this for a couple of years now. It's a great conference. I highly recommend it. So maybe give us a little synopsis on what court is.
Oh, thank you. Yes, CORT stands for the Conference on Religious Trauma. And when I first started learning about religious trauma syndrome, I didn't even have the words to express my loss and what I had been through. I just knew it kind of seemed similar to people who leave cults. I felt like we had some similarities there. But for a number of years, I was totally on my own, had no idea. And then one day I found Dr. Marlene Winnell on an interview on the internet. And I was like, what is this lady is saying everything that I've been feeling, and I didn't have words for it. So I rushed out and bought her fantastic book, Leaving the Fold, and called her up right away, just stalked her right from the start. And a friendship was born and a mentorship. And so Marlene was a really big push in me developing the conference on religious trauma, because I said to her, well, religious trauma is a very big deal. Do we have conferences about it yet? And she said, nope. Then you're the one to do it. And silly me, I just jumped right in there, never having attended a conference before. Oh my God. And it was a great success. So 2021 was our first one. And then just a few months ago, we had Court 2022. And it's where I invite psychologists, social workers, counselors, coaches, mental health clinicians who understand about religious trauma syndrome. So the losses that we suffer when we're part of a rigid authoritarian fundamentalist group. There are losses that we suffer to be a part of that group. And then when we leave that group, there are more losses. The losses are compounded as we lose our community, our purpose, our identity. And we need to be talking about these things, because there's a pervading idea, an incorrect idea, that religion is benign, but actually it can be quite pernicious. There can be terrible harms inflicted in the name of religion. And so the Conference on Religious Trauma aims to bring those to light. And I have people speaking from every background you can imagine, from former evangelicals, former Muslims, former Jews, people from just every background, because it really knows no bounds. Religious trauma has no borders.
Fantastic. And now you've got I guess the conference bug has bit you, because now you're doing something else, which you're calling Shameless Sexuality.
Yes, and I'm really grateful to my ex-husband for that name. So we divorced, but we're still quite a tight-knit family, even though I'm remarried now. But so I was in our family chat, and I said, I want to do a conference to help people who are recovering from purity culture indoctrination. I'm trying to think of a snazzy name. What should it be? And we're tossing all these things back and forth. And he says, how about Shameless Sexuality? I was like, yes, bingo. That's exactly what it will be. And right away, I contacted my friend, Dr. Daryl Ray from Recovering from Religion. I said, hey, Daryl, would you be interested in speaking at a conference for people recovering from purity culture? He was all over that. He just thought that was fantastic. So he was giving me recommendations of people he thought might be a good fit for speaking at the conference. And we have a very full roster of people who will be joining us. Some are authors, some are psychologists. They all have an understanding of purity culture and the dynamics there, and how hard it can be for people who leave religion and now they're trying to figure out how to date or about having sex. I mean, I'm working with some folks who are in their 50s and who have never had the pleasure of being intimate physically with another human being, because they were waiting to find till God brought them someone, and then they don't even believe in God anymore. But now here they are, and they don't have any clue about how to interact with people, because purity culture kept them separate for so long. So there's a lot to unpack there. It's going to be a great conference online, October 14th to 16th, and people can go to shamelesssexuality.org and get tickets.
Fantastic. Shamelesssexuality.org.
And it's not short for orgasm. but you know,
that makes that a whole lot more memorable. So yeah.
Although I'm glad that Dr. Del got in there. For those of you out there in the audience that might not know who Dr. Del Rey is, he's a fantastic psychologist, and he's such a great guy. I mean, one of the first time I met Dr. Del Rey, he's talking to me. He says, "Kev, he says to me, he says, do you know what the definition of a pervert is?" I said, "No, Del, what is it?" He says, "It's somebody who has better sex than you." This is the kind of man you're dealing with. The very first time I met him at a conference, and I was going to Imagine No Religion in Kamloops, not far from your neck of the woods, Janice. And I bring my girlfriend at the time with me, and we're just supposed to do the interview. Say, oh, hey, this is my girlfriend, and Karen was her name, and all that stuff. And hey, Karen, how you doing? Hi, it's a pleasure to meet you. I'm Daryl. Here's a vibrator. He gave her a vibrator right off the bat.
He never gave me one.
I was going to say, I met him too, and I didn't get a
He's holding
vibrator. How rude.
I was just wondering why the
Daryl
candlesticks
Ray's
with batteries.
I might be getting Daryl in trouble here with the ladies. Right off the bat, it was what do you say to a man like that? Right
I say
He's
hello.
awesome. Yeah, exactly. I say, do you have any more of those things? Yeah, he's a real delight, and he's quite an author too. And I just thinking of a couple of his books, The God Virus and Sex and God, really important books for people who are recovering from religion. And their organization is so huge, recovering from religion, and they also spawned the Secular Therapy Project, which is very, very important, and that's in many countries around the world now. So because, of course, if people are looking to get some help recovering from religious trauma, we don't want them going to a religious counselor or a religious therapist. We want them going to a qualified secular therapist. So seculartherapy.org, I think, is their website. And of course, I also am a secular therapist here in Canada.
Fantastic. So,
I have a question. Actually,
okay.
Stemming from that interview we did have about secular therapy, do you like the difference between Canada and the US? Like, I think it would be very difficult for me to find a therapist that was not a secular therapist unless I was willing to pay for it. And I actually sought it out, because it seems to me that in Canada, secular therapy, in the sense of the phrase, is the default and not something you have to seek out.
You'd be surprised. No. So I, of course, belong to a governing body, as all therapists should have a governing body. Pardon me. But I do think that a majority of the people that I interact with, hundreds and hundreds of members of this body are religious, because a ton of religious people go in to become counseling. So lots of them then just counsel in their church. And it's one thing if you're a church goer and you want to get counseling from your church counselor, but it's very, very different if a person who's not part of a church body and they're just looking for, well, who might be a good counselor? And it doesn't say anything in that counselor's bio about the fact that they are actually religious. And so even though, of course, the idea is that we're going to be able to be so professional, we will never bring our own beliefs into things. But if you're a diehard, devoted Christian, your mandate is to preach the gospel in season and out of season. And so that does come through. I mean, if a woman comes to you and she's thinking about getting an abortion, that's where it could be an issue for a religious counselor, or if there's LGBTQ issues coming up. There are just subtle ways. So I really encourage people to ask potential therapists, to interview them. Are they religious? Do they attend a church? And then even ask them some of those things. What would happen if I wanted to talk to you about abortion, or those sorts of things? So there are a lot of good therapists who are able to maintain that neutrality, but the more devout one is to their belief system, I think that's really when it can cause trouble.
So the body, I'm not sure, I imagine it's some kind of body of psychologists or whatever, like Canada-wide, province-wide, maybe both.
Yep.
Do they not have guidelines that if people violate those guidelines, they would get
reprimanded? Yes. So governing bodies definitely, ought to have guidelines and people. And so that's a reason that I belong to a governing body, so that people can, if they have a complaint or something, they can contact my body. My experience is, in general, that a lot of people who are interested in becoming therapists are either Christians or very woo oriented, like really kind of maybe into the new age, The Secret, all that kind of thinking like that. And that also
Yeah.
can be an issue.
Oh, I bet it can. Yeah.
I find my experience. I mean, I don't. I haven't met a whole lot of therapists that are willing to take me on because I'm just too dangerous of a case. The few of them that I have met, they start out like really with some really good professional terminology, and all of a sudden, it goes in when it becomes a bit more intimate. All of a sudden, they bring Jesus in. It's almost like it feels like a switch and a bait and switch.
Yeah.
Was.
Wow.
And it kind of makes you wonder if are you doing this to just bring more members in your fold of your church, or are you just like being genuine and this is what your beliefs are? It's really hard to tell.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it probably is that they're genuine. They're coming from a genuine place. But I would feel hideously uncomfortable at this point in my life if I was kind of bearing my intimate thoughts to someone who was religious, because
Yeah.
there is a lot of judgment that goes along with being religious. And it's not even, I mean, if you were raised in it, that's just how you end up. You
Hmm.
can't even really help it, or you're not aware of it. So I'm not saying there aren't good therapists who do happen to be Christian, because there are some out there. But I am saying it makes a lot more sense to seek out professional secular therapy.
Hmm. So going back to shameless sexuality, maybe you'd be so kind to give us what exactly. I mean, you've got the experience with this, with purity culture. Can you give us a bit of an example of what the kind of life this is?
Yeah, sure. So being raised in a really evangelical home, and so a lot of these people also were homeschooled, and so my motivation in homeschooling my children was to keep them safe from the devil, safe from the clutches of the devil. And boy, sexuality definitely fell in with that. So I mean, at the time, I was wearing a head covering, no makeup or jewelry, just long skirts and dresses, very, very modest. And I had daughters, and so that's the way that I was raising them as well. And so I was training them that sex was only for marriage, and marriage was only between one man and one woman. And so you would never have sex outside of marriage. And some parents take it a lot further. Even they condemn masturbation and condemn their children and shame their children for masturbating, or for having fantasies, or even thinking about or having a crush on a
Hmm.
member of the other sex. And we internalize that shame, and it's so harmful. It can really twist and warp our own ability to appreciate sex, or accept our own desires. If we're a member of the LGBTQ community, which I am, and I wasn't able to. I knew it from about the time I was probably 12. I knew that I was attracted to women as well, or females as well. But I was very religious, so there was no room for me to express it. And it wasn't till near the end of my marriage with my husband, my first husband, and I said, I think that I am actually bisexual. And his response was great. He's like, and this is a surprise to you, because it's like, surprise to me. I just thought that was really funny. But so now, having the freedom, having left religion and purity culture, just feeling that freedom to explore, and without shame. But a lot of people, even though they've left religion, they remain trapped in that shame cycle. So people who attend the conference, they'll be We'll have someone talking about dating after purity culture. We've got the author, Dr. Lori Mintz. She wrote a book called Becoming Clitorate. It's a wonderful, wonderful book. It's so clever. And she'll be talking about orgasm, the differences, for men and women. And then
I gotta
someone
write this down.
talking
Becoming clitorate. Becoming
becoming literate. Yes.
clitorate.
And then
I was looking for the book, but I couldn't find it. So it's
I see what you did there.
Thank you for that one. Good one, buddy.
Nice.
Good.
I know another issue that a lot of women face when they've coming out of purity culture backgrounds. They really struggle with vaginismus and dyspareunia, which is very, very painful sex. And so it's like a physical response to the shame and the emotional damage that's been drilled into us with the false and poor teachings around sexuality. And religions really want to control your sexuality. That's a huge thing for them. And it's certainly no different for Christianity, but there are other religions too. And it's very big in cults. Cults also want to control with whom and when you are having sex with other people. So I feel like it's time for this conference, and I just want to blow it out of the water. I want to open up the dialogue so that people feel comfortable talking about recovery from purity culture. We're going to have a panel called More Than Monogamy, and it's a bunch of people. I'll be on that panel also. People who either opened their relationship or their marriage. Some had good experiences, some had experiences they don't care to repeat, or maybe they went from being in a straight hetero relationship to exploring the LGBTQ community. It's just going to be, I think, an interesting and fun panel discussion for people who are curious.
Yeah, absolutely. I find it interesting how religion has this obsession with sexuality. I mean, I understand that probably the biggest threat to religion is sex. Because let's face it, we are very sexual beings. I can't speak for women, but I know for guys, I'm pretty sure all the guys would agree with me. The guys will do just about anything for a piece of ass.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say that religion prefers to control minds, of which, sexuality is a part of that. But hey,
Yeah.
your go-to.
Mm-hmm.
Have at her, bro.
What I find interesting is a proper sex life is such a vital component of your self-esteem as a person. And to really distort that, you're just asking for lack of a better term, a sick individual. I mean, a person who's feeling shame, feeling doubt, feeling a huge problem with self-esteem. You cannot grow into a good individual. I should say, I'm not even sure what words I need to use here, but you know what I mean, right?
Of course, there are some folks who identify as asexual, and so that is also a legitimate expression of
Yes.
identity. I would say that we need to know our own bodies. We need to get comfortable with what feels good for us and what doesn't feel good. And we also need to be curious about other people that we're going to be intimate with or be having sex with. We want to know what feels good to them, what doesn't feel good. We want to have really good conversations around consent. And consent, if you were raised in a fundamentalist religious home, consent does not factor in. You must be obedient. Obedience is prized, not autonomy. So I have worked with some folks who have said one of the greatest ways they expanded themselves was joining some BDSM groups, because that was the first time they really learned about consent and what consent meant and the power of consent. And consent can be withdrawn at any time. So we want to be teaching our young people this, our children this. We don't, when auntie and uncle so-and-so come over, we don't want to force our children to run over and give them a hug. We want to give them the option. Do you feel like hugging, so-and-so, or do you feel like you don't want to do that right now? Giving kids the choice and teaching them about consent from an early from an early age, I think is really helpful.
Oh, I wish I would have had that because my Aunt Sophie would always pinch my cheeks so hard. Look, she's growing up. I had to run away from that.
My parents would just laugh at me if I complained about something. Ah. I'm kidding, kind of.
One thing that I remember from when I was, well, after I left religion, started to realize that there was a lot of guilt in religion. There was a lot of shaming. There was a lot of judgment. And, a lot of this comes down to putting a person's self-esteem down low enough so that they need to have Jesus to lift them back up.
Yeah.
And it's and I think when it comes to talk about with sex and stuff, it is something that everybody experiences. Everybody experiences different ways, but it's to put a stigma on it for take something that's natural and then and convince people that this is something you should feel ashamed about, and you need Jesus so that you become pure, so that you don't have those cravings. It's almost like
catch-22.
Yeah, it's almost like a form of mind control.
Yes.
I keep thinking of Christopher Hitchens and what are you're commanded to be well and destined to be sick or something like that.
Oh,
right? Like
To be well.
Yeah. I was just going to say, just to clarify, it's not like people in church or whatever are like, "Oh, I'm going to brainwash them by doing this." That's just like the culture that they've developed and what's become normal. So it's not like they do stuff like that out of malice. They think that's how to. They think it's their way of making the world better.
Oh, yes. I mean, my parents certainly thought they were doing the right thing, raising me and my siblings according to their own beliefs and their own faith system. They didn't set out to screw us up. That's just kind of that was just an unhappy byproduct of it. But one thing that I do also really encourage my religious trauma recovery clients, any place we can swap out judgment for curiosity, it's going to expand our world. Judgment really narrows things, but curiosity, when we give ourselves permission, and now I can be curious about anything that piques my interest. And I tell people, life is a huge buffet table with delectable dishes as far as the eye can see, and religion and fundamentalism would have us starve to death right in front of that buffet table. So it's about gathering experiences, collecting experiences. I'm going to give myself permission to take a bite of every dish on the table, as long as something isn't illegal or harming another person. I'm going to give myself permission to try it. And if I don't like it, I give myself permission to spit it out and not have another bite. And if I do like it, I'm going to go back again and again, and seconds and thirds if I really want to do that.
Just make sure you don't double dip that chip in that buffet.
That's right. No double dipping. But I like that idea of being curious and being allowed to be curious. And that can be true with sexuality too.
And it's something that needs to be fostered on early in children. I remember having this debate not too long ago, but this guy, and I was telling him that sexuality needs to be taught at an early age. And we're talking like even 5. And this guy was virtually very against it. And my argument was, well, would you teach your son about gun safety at the age of 5? And they said, well, of course I would. I said, well, you do realize that your child might never own a gun, right? But your son or daughter will have sex at some point. Don't you think you want him or her to have as much information as possible before this happens? And my parents said, you know what? You get a point.
Yeah, excellent.
I'm kind of proud about that.
Yes, so it does start very early with teaching our children the proper names, the accurate terms for parts of their body, and to let them know again about consent, that nobody is allowed to touch their body without their consent, and that we have some parts that we really do consider private, and especially no one is allowed to ask to see those or touch them or whatever without our consent. And nowadays, with the internet being everywhere in every home, and I see little children playing with their parents' cell phones, so we need to really be frank with our kids that there are predators online and that there are healthy and unhealthy ways, safe and unsafe ways to be interacting with people online. And if someone is requesting nude pictures of you or asking you to do things that in any way you feel uncomfortable with, we need to talk about that, and we need to empower our kids to be able to say no and to come to us so they know they can bring any topic to us, and we're not going to laugh and we're not going to shame them. We're going to take them seriously and have a good conversation about it.
I want to interject briefly and say my parents would have teased me if somebody had come and pinched my cheeks, but I did have a proper upbringing in terms of privacy and all that kind of stuff. I actually, I was raised in a non-religious household.
Nice.
But I wanted to add that if a child is old enough to formulate the question, that child deserves an answer.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Excellent.
I also think there's a lot of religious people out there that think that, at the age of 5, we're not teaching kids about orgies at the age of 5. It's not what's happening here.
Yeah.
Well, they'll just have a question, say, "Oh, what's that? Oh, that's a penis. Okay, can I have an Oreo cookie now, please?" That's about the extent of what they want to know, right? That's about the extent. Although, the confession time here for a moment, the most embarrassing thing I had to do to explain to a kid, I was dating this woman years ago, and we were moving her stuff, right? So it's moving day. So her daughter, and God knows she's probably like 6 or 7 at the time, right? She got into her mother's drawer and took out like bras and all that, and she had a handful, and she found her mother's dildo. But she didn't have enough space to carry in her arms, so she put her. She's carrying her mother's dildo in her mouth, walking out the door, and everybody.
Oh my God.
And her mom just melted right there and ran to grab that out of her mouth.
Wow.
Too embarrassed to tell her daughter what it was. So I had to explain to her daughter later what it was. In terms of 7-year-old would understand, right?
Oh my God. That's a sitcom right there.
I think my entire life would probably be good as a sitcom. But yeah, that was one of those very embarrassing moments.
That's hilarious. How did you describe it? I want to know how you described it.
Inquiry minds want to know.
Curiosity is the theme.
That's right.
I started by using the term massager. That's what I started. And I'm not going to go into more details at this point.
Come back a week later. Oh, my neck hurts so much.
Kids will say the darndest things, right? Oh, here's another story. You'll laugh at this one too. I remember in the old days where ATMs started coming out and dealt with the bank tellers most of the time, right? And there's this woman at the bank, and this is a Saturday morning. There's a big lineup, and she's got her 6-year-old daughter with her. And the kid doesn't want to stand in line at the bank. She's bored out of her mind, right? So her mom kind of goes to her and says, pipe down, kid. You need to be quiet. Her daughter says to her, very loud enough, in the back for everybody to understand. If her mom says, if you don't pipe down, you're not gonna have any dessert or anything like that. And then her daughter says, well, yeah. Well, then I'll just tell everybody you had daddy's penis in your mouth this morning.
Wow.
Once this poor woman turns every shade of purple you can imagine, grabs her daughter's hand, just bolts out of the bank, and as soon as that door closed, the entire bank erupted in air.
Oh my God.
Oh my God. Oh, that's awesome.
Oh, man.
Kids are special. Of course, I raised my kids, as I said, with my own purity kind of issues there. And then when they were in their teens, I deconverted entirely. And so they really saw me go from one thing to another. I'm sure they got whiplash from how much I changed. And then I was, concerned, how did my teachings affect them and hamper them as they moved into adulthood? And then I found out that it was actually okay, because eventually, a number of years later, one of my daughters and I had suites up and downstairs from each other, and then we were both moving out at the same time. So we were putting boxes on the porch as we were getting ready, and I saw there was a box that had pictures of kitchen, like stackable kitchen containers, and I said, "Oh, are you getting rid of those containers? Can I take them?" And she said, "Yeah, no problem." So I move into my own space, and then I'm opening up the box, and I pull out handcuffs and ropes and a ball gag. A ball gag. I'm laughing so hard. Tears are streaming down my face. So I just take a picture of the contents and the box, and I messaged my daughter and I said, "Contents not as advertised." And she's like, oh my God. She said, "That is the most embarrassing thing. That's the worst thing that's ever happened in my life." And I said, "I am so happy that you are so free." I just think that's wonderful. That let me know, okay, somehow in spite of, their early training, she was able to be her own person. And I just think that's delightful. And I did ask her if she wanted them all back. She's like, "No, get rid of them."
So did you donate them or like what?
I'm not going to say.
All right then.
Yeah. I'm just thinking like the contrast though between like if you saw that while you were still a Christian, you would probably have a complete freak out over something like that, or you don't think so?
Some of the things I wouldn't even have known what they were, or I might have even been wondering why would she have handcuffs?
Oh, okay.
Like I was experienced. I wasn't a virgin when I got married. My husband was, but I had been. I backslid for a time in my late teens and early 20s and really experienced a lot of the world, was a singer in a rock band, all this kind of stuff. Before I had my back to Jesus moment and then really lost my mind. But so I had some experience, but still, I would say there was no internet then, and there wasn't access to pornography like there is today, or intimate videos, however you want to call them. That's another topic that I often get into with my clients who are recovering from purity culture, and they have strong questions and concerns and feelings and fears around porn. And particularly if they grew up hearing that it's all bad all the time, and they don't know that there is such a thing as ethical porn, where everybody who's involved in it is adequately compensated, and there are safety, things being used, and
Consent, obviously.
Consent, absolutely, being the primary. And they have never even heard of this, and also the idea that some people find it quite fine and gratifying, and they can enjoy it, and then they can go away from it and live their life. Some people really do have a problem, and it tends to like kind of take over, as any activity that we have in our life can take over our life and get out of balance. So that's when things need to be addressed. But I think it needs to be normalized, the idea that, and same with sex work. No, I don't think it should be illegal. I think it should be regulated for the safety of everyone involved. And these people are providing a service. So not everyone thinks that way, but I really want to be progressive in my thinking about sex and sexuality, because sex isn't going away. So let's be safe about it, and let's enjoy it, and let's allow our children to grow up knowing about it, and when they're old enough that they can enjoy it safely as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean,
if you're not willing to defend the rights of all women, then how much of a feminist are you? If you're willing to, say sex workers, that should be eliminated. No, that's not going to go away. Be realistic and protect the people who are involved in that, and respect them.
Of course, I've got a comment here that sex workers are not exclusively women. The vast majority of them, they're not exclusively women. They're also male sex workers. You're right. We did grow up with the image, especially I remember as a kid, and my mother was like very stern on the subject of pornography, because it was all like people being exploited. But if you look behind the scenes now, there's some fascinating documents about how pornography is made, and you'd be surprised how many women are actually producers of porn. And of course, we're not talking like the in front of cameras, web cameras. We're talking like professionally made. The camera women and all that. The directors of our little women, and the stars in the pornography. Women are usually better paid off than the men as well.
Mm,
It's a different world now than what we were raised
yes.
as kids, for sure.
Yes, and there is one series. Well, there are a couple of series that I'd like to recommend that are just like Netflix type series. One was so wonderful. It's called Sex Ed, and it's out of Great Britain.
Mm.
And oh my gosh, it's a comedy, and it's just so wonderful. And the mother in the show is as a sex therapist. But the other one, which was quite marvelous, was by Amanpour and Company, so like PBS type thing, and it was called Sex and Love Around the World, and it was such an interesting, marvelous docu-series exploring it in all these different cultures. What does it look like over here, and what does it? And it was just so fantastic to learn about how people in different cultures view sex and express themselves sexually.
Yeah, that's one thing I really enjoy after my deconversion is you can go to other cultures and you can look at how do they view sex, how do they view this type of morality, how do they judge, and pardon me, you can do all of this without feeling guilty that you're putting your soul at risk.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
I find it fascinating as a French Canadian myself. For me, it was a big contrast when I moved to BC and realized I thought people here were very,
Hippies.
yeah, no, very prudish, prudish compared to what I grew up with, right? I mean, I grew up, for example, even back home, whenever you met somebody of the opposite sex, it was automatic kiss on the cheek. Even sometimes you'd have a kiss, and a third one on the lips as well. And there was nothing ever sexual about it. It was just a very warm greeting.
Right.
But I could never even attempt to do something like that here. As a matter of fact, when I first moved here to BC in the year 2000, that was my natural inclination. My brother, who had been here a couple of years before I was, had to stop me. You don't do that here because they'll send you to jail for this kind of stuff.
Wow.
Because when he arrived a couple of years earlier, that's what he did. Hi, I'm Lisa. Oh, hi, Lisa. I'm Stephen. And smooch. She was just like looking back and slapping him across the face. What's going on here? And this is such a shame because I think we lose a lot, and I think it isolates us as humans. We have this stay out of my bubble mentality, and it's very predominant in the States, especially. And I think it's such a shame because we lose a lot of warmth and contact as human beings that we kind of need, actually.
Yeah, and the pandemic has really been extra hard and difficult in that sense. Just people who already were maybe feeling somewhat alienated and isolated because they were no longer part of their religious community. And now they were really isolated there because, of course, all conferences had to be online, so people, they just were feeling so cut off from even trying to build their new community. Yeah, it's been a hard time.
So Janice, as a therapist yourself, you got to have a couple of stories that are worth telling. Come on. I told a couple of weird stories from my
without
life.
violating doctor patient confidentiality or whatever kind of thing, right?
I think
put your license on the line. We won't tell anybody.
Oh yeah, I think the ball gag story that I told that could stand in for like 5 stories because that was such a.
You come across.
Yeah, I want to know more about your daughters. Frankly, you have no sons,
right?
How many daughters do you have? How old are they?
Very healthy. Yeah, very
awesome.
healthy. And I will also say, you don't know how far you've really been able to expand your views on sex and sexuality until a family member tells you that they have an OnlyFans page. Then that really tests your mettle because you're either going to be horrified or you're going to be tell me about it. Why are you doing it? And are you enjoying it? Is this expanding your world? Are you being safe? about it. If you feel empowered by doing this, I want to support you. And that really tests you as a family member.
That's a fantastic answer.
Mhm.
So the conference is called Shameless Sexuality, Life Through Purity Culture. When is this happening, and where can people find out more about this stuff?
It is happening online, so people can join us from around the world. October 14th through 16th, and people can buy tickets for the live online event, which means they can interact with the speakers and ask questions while the speakers are doing their sessions. And also they have the opportunity we have some happy hour times, socializing throughout the conference. And people can buy those tickets, or people can pay just to get the recordings. And for people who attend the live event, there are continuing education credits available. And I'm also offering student discounts, and I offer partial scholarships for people in need. And it's really not that expensive. I'm only charging $149 for the entire weekend, and that includes all the recordings and the live event. If people just want the recordings, that's $99, and they can go to shamelesssexuality.org.
Shameless Sexuality. Now, when you say you have a happy hour moment, what kind of happy hour are we talking here? The general one, or the more sexualized one with the bad guys and everything?
I didn't say happy ending. It's just a happy hour. So we have a platform, an online platform, and for people who are attending the live event, when I say, okay, for the next hour, you can come join us in this, and it's like a virtual room that we're in. Say maybe it looks like a bar or a living room or something, and you come in there with your picture of your face, and you see all the other people there, whoever wants to be there, and you drag your face, move it over to the circle where these people are, and then suddenly you can see everyone there on your screen, and you're interacting, and then you can move over to another group. People really enjoy it. They like having the interaction. Yeah,
like that VR kind of thing. That sounds fun.
Yeah,
Yeah.
We'll continue to promote it all the way until, we'll try to help you guys as much as we can, because it's what we do.
Thank you.
Are you also doing a lot, like it's all online, or is there any?
The whole thing is online. Okay. Yep, the whole thing is online, and some of our speakers are joining us from Australia, from the UK, from all over the United States, and from Canada as well. But yeah, I like to do it online. It keeps my costs down for sure. Yeah. And then with the recordings, people can watch from anywhere.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Now, you also did a Godless Mom podcast, didn't you? Or
I did. It was called The Godless Moms, and it was with my good friend Courtney, who is the original Godless Mom. And she just got so busy. She does so much, and she has a media company called Porthos, and so that's really blowing up right now. So we only did our podcast together for about a year, and then she's been helping me orchestrate my Divorcing Religion podcast, and her husband John is doing all my editing for me. So I really appreciate their support. And the Godless Moms was very much about secular parenting. So if people are raising kids, what's that?
It's coming back, right? They will come back, the Godless Moms?
I don't think the Godless Moms will come back, because we're both just so busy right now, but it still remains there. People can access the shows, and we had some interesting guests and just some really good talks.
We'll just send you guys. We'll send Christine your way. Christine will help you guys. All right, Christine, you're a Godless Mom too, so you can.
Yeah. My daughter's certainly. She is an interesting person, and I'm very proud of her. She's 25. And,
nice.
Yeah.
Janice, thank you so much for being here with us on the show today. I really appreciate that. And before I let you go, of course, as per usual, I gotta have you say hi.
May I interject one more time?
Because I would like to. In the middle of my thing.
I know I never do that, do I?
Let's be professionals here.
So, because I have learned something today, and I will never look at the extension.org as organization anymore. From now on, every time I read something .org, I'm going to think orgasm, right?
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just learned check your boxes before you give anything to your mom. So.
Yes. Thank you. She'll appreciate it.
Yes. Janice, as per usual, I gotta have you say hi. This is Janice Selbie, and I took a left at the valley.
Hi, this is Janice Selbie, and I took a left at the valley.
Fantastic.